to a couple years ago, headed to Atlanta, and that was obviously a really tough decision, but I felt like it was an opportunity at that time I couldn't turn down. And when this opportunity came back up from Coach Saban to come back here to Alabama, it was one that I jumped on, and I was fortunate enough to have this opportunity present itself, and just looking forward to it. Looking forward to working with Coach Saban again. He's a great mentor of mine, somebody you obviously can learn a great deal from. The players, our entire coaching staff. So excited about the opportunity. It's good to get going again.
Okay, guys, we'll open the seat right back here with Cecil.
Hey, Coach, Cecil Hurt from the Tuscaloosa News. Could you clarify for us a little bit, because there's all kind of stories out there about when you met Tua, how long you've known Tua, what your relationship with Tua is,
Sure.
how you recruited him in your previous stops.
Yeah,
and
so
forth.
Tua used to come to camp with us previously when I was at USC, and so he started to develop the relationship there, and I had offered him a scholarship pretty early in his career in high school, and had just started that relationship and developed that relationship. And then going back to when I took over at Alabama here in 2016, even in that transition as Lane was headed to FAU, got a chance to get on the road and go recruiting and kind of reconnect and reestablish that relationship. And that was when Tua came mid-year, and then obviously about a month or so later is when I left for Atlanta. So had kind of a long-standing relationship with he and his family, his mom and dad and whatnot. And so I think it made for a little bit of an easier transition at that time, and even now, of just having that relationship of knowing the family, being in their home in Hawaii on home visits. So I just think all in all, for us, for Tua and I, that previous relationship that we've had, I think has been very helpful in the transition now with a new coordinator, myself coming in here for this year.
Go here to the left with Michael.
You talked about that 2017. You were able to do some recruiting. Could you see what was a potential with this class and what they've done? Are you surprised by the success they've had?
I don't know if I'm surprised. I think at any time, when you go into recruiting, I give Coach Saban a lot of credit. He is not one that chases stars by any means. About how many stars a guy has determines how good he is. I mean, we pride ourselves on doing our own evaluation, trusting our evaluation in the process, and trying to find the best players that fit Alabama and what it entails to play at Alabama. And I think when you go back and look at that class, of Tua, the wide receivers, and Judy, and Ruggs, and Smitty, Najee, obviously, and B-Rob at the running back spot, the offensive linemen, you saw what Leatherwood and Jed have done, and those types of guys. So I just think all in all, that class was evaluated really well. We felt like could come in and contribute. And then at that point, then it's the development of the player, which is obviously talked about here quite a bit. It's developing the players on and off the field. I think you have to give the players credit too, and their work ethic, their commitment to working. They got some opportunities to play early in their career, and I think they took advantage of it, and they've continued to grow from year to year.
Okay, back to the left with Aaron, trying to keep up.
Steve, we all see how proficient Tua is in the RPO, and we know how that stresses a defense. But given the quality of wide receivers that you have, how key is it to get him as comfortable in full field reads, and how's he doing in that regard?
Well, I think, for us, every year you come out of a season, you try to evaluate big picture and how you can improve as a football team, and us specifically offensively. And we really felt like if we could continue to grow in that area of full progression reads, so that people, when you become one-dimensional to some capacity, or you do a few things well, our feeling is the more things you do well, the harder you are to defend. And so we felt like that was an area we could really improve in. I think Tua has really bought into that, has worked extremely hard. He's shown drastic improvements, and I think the receivers see it as well. So now are you defending the play-action pass? Because we are running the football well and the commitment to running the ball. Are you defending the RPO? Are you defending the drop-back pass game with full progression? So, I think one of the misnomers is we're just shifting to a drop-back team. No, we're trying to add to an offense that was very prolific a year ago, and how can we even be more prolific, and how can we stay ahead of defenses and what they're trying to stop?
Come back up front here on the right with John.
I had two, if I could. First, what's it like taking over an offense that has a Heisman runner-up, Blitnikoff Award winner, and a number of other proven playmakers? And two, what did you kind of see that up to or early on that stuck out to you?
Well, it's very similar. You know, when I went to Atlanta, they were just coming off, you know, going to the Super Bowl, and Matt Ryan was NFL MVP, and obviously Julio Jones. So I'm a little bit accustomed to stepping into this role of taking over an offense. I even go back to 2005 when I had been with the Oakland Raiders, and I came back to USC the year after Matt Leinart had won the Heisman and they had won the national championship of beating Oklahoma. So this isn't as foreign to me. I think what it is you come in and you try to evaluate the whole thing and you say, okay, how can I continue to help this team get better? How can I try to help these players improve and put them in the best position to have success, not only short term but long term? That's our job as coaches to do. And then buying into the entire organization and the program and the values of the organization. So that's kind of my mindset when it comes to that of what I can do to try to help and do my part to put us in the best position to be successful. Tua, I think early on, has always had a unique ability to have a very quick release. The day I saw him throw, I'll never forget, when he was in high school. I think he might have been in the 10th grade. It was a really windy day there in Hawaii, and he was cutting the wind. I mean, and was extremely accurate, and that always stood out to me and still does to this day. But now, after watching him play college football, studying the tape, being with him in spring ball, he's a very instinctual player. He has a natural feel for passing the football and the passing game. And so I think just on that note, I think those two things really stand out to me. Just first thought of his ability to stay accurate and regardless of the elements, and his quick release, and then the instincts that he plays the position with.
Stay on this side with Adam Critter.
Steve, you mentioned your familiarity with some of these wideouts from guys that you interact with, recruited with. But what about Jalen Waddle? I know it's early, but what have been your observations of him?
He very dynamic player. I mean, Jalen's the type of guy, if he gets the ball in space, he can score a touchdown almost at any moment. And I think he's a young man who works extremely hard. I mean, he has a high football IQ. He loves the game of football. He works at it. He wants to be as good as he can be, which are obviously all great qualities to have. But he's definitely a dynamic player who you have to continue to try to find ways to get the ball in his hands.
Back to the left side with Reiner.
Two questions. First, what did you learn most from your 1 year in the NFL? I asked Nick this, but could you foresee using like 10 personnel because of the attrition you guys have had at tight end and, given the strength of the wide receivers?
Hold on, call it the right. What is it? It's not 10 personnel here. What is it?
I would. Oh, okay.
Coach, you give it less than one.
Okay,
So I just wanted
got
to
it.
make sure we're-
Got it. Well, I think that I had a year in the NFL early in my career back in 2005, and that was a great experience for me. At that time, I was 29 years old at that time, coaching quarterbacks for the Oakland Raiders, and Rich Gannon was the returning quarterback at 39 years old. So just the demands of coaching a guy 10 years older than you who you felt like every day you walked into that meeting, how are you going to try to find a way to get him better and to coach him to feel like you are providing something to him to be the best player he could be? I mean, even in that spring, it was Jerry Rice and Tim Brown were the two wide receivers, and I'm the one up in there installing plays and whatnot. So that was an interesting process, but it helped me the second time around when I went to Atlanta a couple years ago. Like you say, you have Matt Ryan in that room, you have Julio Jones, you have an all-pro center in Alex Mack. And so, what you go into is how do you try to help these guys be the best players they can be? And I think that's our, like I said earlier, that's our responsibility as coaches, is to put our players in the best position to be successful, whether that's through scheme, fundamentals, technique, whatever that may be. So loved my experience of doing that. I think the other thing in that league, and the NFL is a matchup league, and how do you find those matchups and create those matchups that are advantageous for you? So hopefully we can bring some of those things back here now that I'm back at Alabama. The red personnel for us, obviously 4 wide receivers and a running back, is something that, I think we'll definitely incorporate into what we're doing. I'd be remiss to keep those 4 wide receivers, not on the field when it presents itself to be an advantageous situation. So, too many times if they're standing next to us on the sidelines, something's wrong, or we feel good about something else that's happening. But they're 4 very dynamic players. They're playmakers. They're competitive. They work hard. They do everything they can that they think we think is right in the program, and ultimately it shows in the way they play on the field. So we got to continue to try to develop that package to make sure when we use it, it's not just we're throwing 4 wide receivers on the field, but there's a rhyme and a reason why we're doing what we're doing.
Back up front here with Ryan.
Hey, good morning, Coach.
Good morning.
Curious if you could describe, maybe just kind of summarize your personal offensive philosophy in just a couple of words.
Well, I think it starts in running the football. In my opinion, every year I've called plays in college football, I've always had 1,000-yard rushers. So, you have to have the ability to run the football. When you can run the football, you can play action pass. The play action pass game is a quarterback's best friend, to where defenses are trying to stop the run, and now you can create throwing lanes down the field for explosive plays, and then an efficient passing game, a high percentage completion type passing game where you get the ball in your playmakers' hands in space to go create plays.
Go in the back with Chris Lowe.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Chris.
How much does it help you that you've already been here previously? You've worked under Nick. You've worked in this system as you make this transition back.
Well, I think it's big. If you recall, when I was here in 2016, I really didn't arrive until after the first regular season game that year. So I was here for the regular season in an analyst role. So I was part of the game planning in process, but I wasn't as integrated with the players that way. So it allowed me at that time to kind of have, I don't want to say a 10,000-foot view of the program, but I had a chance to observe the program because I was here a lot to learn from Coach Saban. As much as I wanted to come and contribute, I wanted to learn as much as I could from a man who I had so much respect for from afar. And so I really came into that situation in 2016 of trying to see how the program was ran and why things were emphasized and the way they were emphasized and when they were emphasized and what was important. And so now coming back before spring ball and as spring ball started, and to hear some of those things get brought up, it just brought back a lot of thoughts and reminders, and I was able to go back through some notes of why those things are important, and then to start to emphasize them on our own, even on the offensive side of the ball, to support that message. And so I think it was big. Obviously, schematically, had a good feel for the system. Obviously, things change a little bit as coordinators change from Coach Dayball to Coach Locks, and now I'm in. But big picture-wise, I think it was very helpful in 2016 to be here for that season.
A few more. Back to Cecil here real quick.
Thanks. I had one more.
Excuse me.
I know it's a oversimplification to say, oh, we've got it back. We want to get him the ball 20 or 25 times. But do you see Najee having that capability to handle that? And also, I think he caught one ball last year. How are your running backs as receivers?
Right. Well, I think obviously when you look at Najee from a physical stature standpoint, he's a big physical runner. Very traditional, the types of runners that have been here at Alabama. And so as you go through that process, obviously there's the development of Brian Robinson, there's the development of Jerome Ford, Trey Sanders, Keelan Robinson, some other guys at the position. Ideally, we want Najee to be fresh and continue to get better as the season goes on and later in the year. So you manage those number of carries, accordingly as the games go. There may be games when he is that total bell cow and we got to go the way we need to go to do what we need to do to win the game. There may be other games when it's not as many. Maybe we do find ways to get him the ball in the passing game and different things. I've been very impressed, I have to say, with the receiving ability of all of our backs so far. I thought Najee and Brian did a really nice job this spring of catching the ball out of the backfield. Early on, what I've seen from Trey and Keelan, they provide those same types of things. And that is something in this system, especially with me, the running backs as receivers out of the backfield are a big benefit for us, especially when we know there's going to be so much attention on the 4 wide receivers. I think we can create some good matchups there with our running backs.
Two more. We'll go AJ and then Alex.
keeping on with the running backs, when Trey Sanders decided to commit to Alabama, he spoke on his talents, being able to take him as a Heisman finalist in his freshman year. Can you talk about what you've seen from Trey Sanders, both as a person and as a player?
I think Trey is an extremely hard-working young man. He's serious about football. And I think the majority of our players that choose to come to Alabama are serious about football and want to be great. And so everything I've seen out of him is he wants to be a great player. He wants to work extremely hard. We've got a long way to go. Obviously, we're one practice in. So, but just early thoughts on him is that he's a hard-working guy, serious about what he does.
We're up here with Alex.
You talked about your experience kind of in the NFL all over the place. You obviously have West Coast roots. How have you seen your offensive scheme evolve over the years, even to the point now where you're adding RPOs and other things like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, the game has evolved a lot from when I first got in 20 years ago to where we are today, just in general, whether it's NFL or college. You know, early on in my career, I was definitely a pro-style approach, West Coast passing game, two-back running game guy. In my later years at Washington as a head coach, we started to transition to more, 3 wide receivers, even 4 wide receiver sets. We went to a complete no huddle my last year. We carried that to USC. Then the RPOs were coming in that time, right as I was leaving Washington, going to SC, and they've continued to evolve. Got to the NFL, incorporated some of those RPOs into the NFL game, but then learned a lot about the matchup game and why the matchup pieces are important to what you do. So I think we are forever evolving. The game of football ultimately is about being physical up front, being able to run the football, taking care of the football, and scoring when you have opportunities to score. So those things will never change in the game. How you get to all of those points are always forever evolving, and I think that's our job as coaches, to evolve, to put our players in the best position to be successful.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Okay, guys, thank you.